Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back. So nice to see you here. I'm so glad that you clicked in to another episode of Still Positive. I am so looking forward to a couple of really fun, anxious days while I wait for scan results. So send the distractions my way. If you have any sort of cat videos or any sort of videos that will distract me from reeling in my head, I would love to see them. So please send them over my way. I will greatly appreciate it. So let's jump right in. Today I'm talking to Lori as she shares a part of her life living with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a group of genetic disorders that affects people in different ways, but it is caused by faulty collagen, which is the glue that holds the body together, and can result in weakened tissue or joints, but it affects people in different ways. I came across Lori's profile on Instagram and I knew I wanted to talk to her immediately. I came for the sick-ass lingerie posts and I stayed for her blog and her posts on making Instagram more accessible, sexuality and disability, and awareness on EDS in general. She's such a joy to have on the show and I'm so excited for you to hear Lori's experience with EDS. Enjoy. Let's be real. People love to gloss over chronic conditions or disabilities with a fleeting comment like, just be positive, or a fleeting insult like, kale will cure you. This is a podcast for when you face a different reality, knowing that positivity isn't a magic wand that's going to cure everything, but a flashlight in the dark that we may or may not have batteries to. Living with a chronic illness or disability makes you feel different, and your difference could be noticeable to others or not, but either can sometimes make you feel invisible. I'm here to tell you that your experience is valid and shared by others in the dark. Positivity is not the missing puzzle piece that's going to solve your life's puzzle, but it can be a beautiful tool that can help you grow, and sharing those experiences can make us grow together. So yeah, Lori, thanks so much for wanting to do this with me. I'm really appreciative that you wanted to jump on the call.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to just start talking about what sort of relationship you have with chronic illness.
It's very complicated, but I think over the years it's certainly evolved more from denial and trying to fight through and, get better. And now it's more so coming to terms with the fact that this is going to be how it is for the rest of my life. And it obviously will change and it will get better at times, it will get worse, but it's still complicated. I think we live in a world which is built for able-bodied people. And of course there are other barriers as well. And I'm very privileged in the fact that, I'm white and I don't have that to face on top of everything else. But it does, affect you negatively, trying to fight to get the accommodation and support that everybody else does so that it levels out the playing field. So it seems like we fight twice as hard to get half as far. So it's very exhausting. So I wouldn't say so much anymore it's a battle with myself. It's more a battle with society and the systems to try and get the right accommodation and have our voices heard. And I know that that's something that a lot of people are also, having to struggle with, which sucks in its own way. Right. But at least then there's that element of support. And I think having found the chronic illness community of people who get it, it's a space to be able to share that. And I think it doesn't feel so alone anymore. So I think my relationship with chronic illness is bittersweet in that I found my best friends through it. I found my partner through it. I've, had great opportunities through it, but it's still something that causes a lot of pain. But I can't quite remember a time where I wasn't ill. So it seems like I've come to a point where it's just accepting it now. And that's not giving up, because I know a lot of people would think, oh, you just got to keep going and like try this and try that. I'm like, well, it's not how it works. You know?
Right. And finding that relationship within yourself, I feel like is so hard to do sometimes, because the mentality of society is like, you are sick, you get better, and then you continue on with your life. And then when that doesn't happen, it's like, what's wrong? Didn't you try eating kale? Or like, didn't you try
You're
this?
still ill. And it's like, yeah, that's the chronic part.
Right. Even accepting that, like for yourself, like you said in the beginning, like that was such a hard transition to come from a space of something's happening to me and then realizing, okay, this is just a new me. This is just a new side of me that I have to like accept and like love for myself.
Exactly. And I think I saw a statistic yesterday which 20%, I think it's 20% of the world's population is disabled, and obviously that differs because of the provisions of care and preventative measures that are in place and things like that. But it seems that because of the lack of representation, it doesn't feel as if there is that massive amount of people who are dealing with that. And when it's in fact, it's like a fifth of all of us, which is
Right.
very similar to, you know, the mental health statistic of 1 in 4. And obviously there's a big relation between that, which I know we've talked about before.
Right.
There is that feeling, especially within society, looking at people who are disabled, it's very much inspiration porn of, oh, you're so strong, you're getting through this, all of that. And we feel like we have to be. And we feel like we have to be this strong, disabled warrior all the time. And that in itself is incredibly tiring. And it's okay to feel sad about your disability. It's a right to be.
Or just like feeling lazy for being in bed all day because you couldn't, and feeling like guilty about it. Like, I'm not trying, but really you're trying so hard to just listen to yourself and understand this is what I need right now.
I think because it's such a productivity driven world, is, you know, the perfect sort of lifestyle for a lot of people that people will idolize is constantly doing stuff, which is so unhealthy anyway for the average person. But especially for people who are disabled, we feel like we have to make up for it. And it's not our fault for thinking that, but it's the way society makes us feel through ableism. So you do feel like you have to be sort of better in school for it. I know I did better in college to get the best grades. And you think, well, at least I've got that going for me. Like, you think that in your head. But it's rough because we associate rest with laziness, which it's not. And I know that I think, to be honest, I think a lot of it is, it's very rarely laziness when it comes to things like getting started and getting the motivation to keep going, because it's either it's something mentally going on, or it's like a physical, if you feel like I cannot get out of bed.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, and accommodating our health and accommodating our needs, especially I think during a time like COVID, people are starting to wake up to that now. And I think self-care is going back to the basics of fundamentally what it is, which is listening to your body and what it needs and honoring it. So, silver lining. It's very small silver lining.
Right. A hair is silver lining.
Yeah, a thread just hanging on the corner. I think, that's something to focus on.
Yeah.
But I think it's given us, a lot of us, a time to actually sort of understand what we need and understand who we are, because we've spent so much time alone, so we spent so much time with ourselves. I know I'm like that anyway. I mean, I'm an introspective person naturally,
Right.
but I've seen a lot of people around me, especially my friends, who are starting to communicate with themselves and understand themselves and think, I need rest today. It's okay if I mean, I know it's cliche, but it's okay not to be okay. And it's okay to have days where you just feel like crap and you eat your comfort food and you watch Netflix, and that's all you do. That's fine.
Yeah.
If that's what your body's telling you.
Absolutely. And I think that letting people understand that that's totally acceptable, and you should be doing those things for mental health reasons and for physical health reasons. It's not that you can't do the things that you want to do eventually. You just have to accept in what capacity your body is willing to do that in like this time. Is it something that you can do later, or is it something that you have to reconfigure into something that's better for you, and there's nothing wrong with either. And I think that a lot of people are catching on to that because of COVID, definitely. It's something that I think that a lot of people in the chronic illness and disabled community have to do when they first understand that something is different. And I think that illness in general and time alone and in unfortunate isolation from other people can definitely do that.
Definitely. I think obviously it's incredibly unfortunate that it has to be under these circumstances that people have come to understand that. And it's not necessarily their fault if they hadn't clicked onto that before. If they haven't been introduced to it or come across it, but it is definitely systematic in that the lack of representation and the lack of actual resources put into closing the gap in financial inequality and access to medical care, of course, impairs your ability to work. It impairs your ability to actually get out there and have that independence. So you do spend a lot of time inside because accessing those spaces, and for one, do you have the money to? No. It's like, do you have the energy to? No. You're in too much pain to because you can't access the medical resources you need to. And it's tough. And I'm, again, lucky that I have the NHS, and it has its flaws for chronic illness and understanding it. But overall, it's absolutely phenomenal.
And can you talk about a little bit like what it's like for you going to the doctor? Like, what's the process like for you? Like, how does that work?
Okay. So I'll make an appointment at my GP, so my general practitioner, and their primary care. So they're the people who will then refer you to secondary care if necessary. So if that's like a service that they obviously can't provide. So then my consultants, who are like rheumatologists, gastroenterologists, neurologists, all of those great people, they will then see me for free. And there's no like signing of anything. There's nothing like that. You just go, you see them, you sit down, you talk to them, and then they will get in touch with you if you need another appointment, or if they can refer you to a service like physiotherapy, because it's like musculoskeletal stuff. So like my rheumatologist can refer me to physio, or my clinician for my POTS, who works in, it's not cardiology, but it's linked within that, can refer me to a different trust. So we have NHS trusts for different districts, so like different counties, and they will have their own different policy, funding, and things like that. But they will essentially try and keep you within the same trust just for legality's sake, and this is easier. But in terms of actually, referrals and seeing people, the average waiting time, I would say, from pre-COVID, because I haven't really had many appointments in this time because they're not in person, so it's difficult to say. They typically do reviews for me every year, every 6 months. But if I do get a new appointment, it's a couple of months normally of waiting. So there is that backlog because it's access to services and funding, and we pay our national insurance, and that's if you earn enough, and it's based off your salary to a degree. There is a cap at certain earnings, but it's a different conversation. But yeah, it's wonderful in that respect.
When you go to the doctor, do you go like right in? Do you have to wait in the waiting room for a while?
Yeah, it's still that vibe. I know that now, obviously with COVID, I think people, they do telephone appointments as much as possible. or video chats. But I think if you do go in, it's like everything's socially distanced. You have to wear a mask unless you're exempt, and you asked to please use hand sanitizer before coming in. There is that barrier again of actually getting to treatment when you're vulnerable. And I know there is that debate around just because you're disabled doesn't mean you're vulnerable. When I'm using the vulnerable term, I mean, immunocompromised and more susceptible to COVID is what I mean.
Right.
So you have to weigh up is it more of a risk to me going to this appointment? So there has been that pushback, for me, of my lack of access to care has affected my health, but that has been a choice that I've had to make, because if I get COVID,
right,
yeah, I already have chronic fatigue if I have long COVID. So,
right.
yeah.
And people I think that underestimate the amount of precaution that chronically ill people, specifically, I'm talking about, I take a lot of precaution, and sometimes I'm like, is this too much? But then on the other hand, I'm like, I know what it's like to be in these situations where I'm stuck in the hospital for months on end, and I'm facing death, and I'm like, I'm not trying to do that optionally.
Exactly.
If it can be avoided, yes.
Yes. I do have that short-term loss for long-term gain in this situation, and I have lost my abilities, like my upper body strength isn't what it was, but I can't go out in my local area because it's not accessible. If I was you can't travel at the moment because we're in lockdown. I can't go into a more accessible space purely for exercise. You can't do that. If you're driving somewhere, especially if you're driving into a different area, you can't do that unless you're doing that for food. So there has been that barrier, especially for disabled people, because of the lack of council funding, which has been going on for years and years and years, to get better pavements and fundamental things like that, so that a community is accessible. I mean, nobody thought that this was going to be what it is. Nobody did. So there isn't that blame there, but there is that. It doesn't seem important because it's it's not a big deal. There's more important things to worry about, is how they view it. Right. But without that, you're, I think, both consciously and subconsciously having it so that people are locked in their home. They can't get out. Mm-hmm. And they think, oh, well, I think there's that view of there's not that many, it won't affect that many people. But it's very much putting a price on the freedom and independence of disabled people. But also there is that it's been a year of shielding, being primarily in the house for a year, in an accessible area. So I can't go out for a walk in my wheelchair, which I think people typically take for granted. But at the same time, it's affecting a lot of people I know, because of the lack of social interaction is now just starting to get to us. It's been a year and we're
right. I did all my
hard now.
Yeah. Right. Especially because it's starting to get nice out again. You're like, all right, I did the whole thing. It's time to come back out. I would love to socialize in real life.
Yeah. There's only so many. It's Netflix parties that you can watch before you just say, you know what?
Right. I've had enough. So is POTS just the blood circulation not getting to your brain, so then it makes you dizzy and then you pass out, or am I totally wrong?
No, that's part of it. It's dysautonomia, it's the autonomic nervous system, and its ability to regulate heart rate and blood pressure.
Okay.
So my blood pressure is low, my heart rate's high. If my blood pressure if my heart rate is to an okay level because of medication, my blood pressure is way too low. So that also causes dizziness, lightheadedness, nausea, muscle weakness. But because of that lack of balance between blood pressure and heart rate, the lack of circulation, so your circulatory system is affected, so then your muscles are affected, so it causes pain as well. and affects your gastrointestinal system, as you've just witnessed. But yeah, it's difficult because it's also other symptoms like excessive sweating, which is gross.
I feel you. Like I know what that's about. You're like, what is happening here?
So dehydration, try and keep on top of your fluid. It's a full-time job. It really is. Chronic illness is a full-time job that you actually have to pay. You have to pay for.
Yeah. It's confusing to like, I don't know how you got into the doctor's office or what were the symptoms that led you to that space, because it is so confusing. Separately, they seem like minor and you're like, okay, I'm sweating a lot, but like whatever. Or like for me, I was like, I'm itchy, but like who cares? You know, like whatever. And then like what was it that got you to the place like, I need to check this out?
Yeah, I think if we go back to the beginning, I think as a kid, I was injury prone. So I wasn't. It was just I was being a kid and my body was having none of it. So I was, I'd fall over and I'd really hurt my ankle and it would be there for a long time and it wasn't healing, but it was like, oh, well, you've just fallen over. Or, my poor parents feel terrible for this, and it's certainly not their fault because I get it. But it was like, oh, there's always something wrong, like drama queen type of thing, which they didn't push for long. It was not something that they felt for long because they realized this isn't her. This is happening far too much. As a kid, one thing that sticks out in my mind is as a kid I was bullied pretty badly, and someone backheeled me in the knee, and it dislocated my knee.
Wow.
So yeah, and I have had times before where I've just been as a young kid, probably around 11, 12, I would be walking and my knee would go.
Wow.
Which isn't normal.
Right.
And I'd be running and my Achilles tendon felt like it had snapped, which it hadn't, but like I'd pulled something in the back of my heel, which is again isn't normal. I'd be horse riding and if I was bending over to like brush my horse's legs, my back would hurt so much and it felt like it was like really painful. Like it was really painful and it shouldn't have been. And at that point, that again would have been things like muscles and tendons. And we suspect at that point is when it might have started with cartilage in my spine, starting to work towards scoliosis, because a few years later, I had an uneven waist, which I thought was just because I carried my bag funny. No joke. If anyone out there has an uneven waist, get it checked out, please, because that's not just because you're carrying your bag funny. That's probably your spine. And going to the physiotherapist and them telling me to stand up straight, I thought I was stood up straight, and they were like, no. And they tried to put me where I physically couldn't stand how they were trying to put me, and my hips felt like they were popping out, and I was like, what is that? That feels really weird. Walking around Costco, Mum, feel my hips. It must have looked weird, just like walking behind me with her hands like cupped around my pelvis, just like, is it popping out? Yeah, that's not normal either. But then going to the doctors with all these things, they're writing it down, and because it doesn't click with them, I think there is that, wow, there's a lot wrong with her, It's like, yeah, that's what I've been trying to tell you.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I think it's a lot more common than we give it credit for. It happens to a lot more people, but it's not normal in that it's not healthy. So there's something underlying. And when I was 13, I had hideous back pain. I was at school and my back hurt so much. I was in tears. And even at that point, that was to be crying at school. Wouldn't have been caught dead crying at school. So I just had enough and I lost it. And my back was hurting so much that when I went back home, walked over to my grandparents' house, it was we need to ring the doctors. And that was the first time that we had thought, this is bad. And that was the journey that we took from that point forward, with my back pain, with my knees and things like that. And there was so much medical gaslighting around that time of, oh, you're putting it on for attention, or, oh, it's just because you're having like deep, dark purple stretch marks on my back, which is because of my EDS, because of my tissue. And then saying, oh, it's because you're a girl.
Oh my God.
Did you go to school? Did you go to school?
Right.
Like, what?
Right.
And, you know, then not putting that together with the fact that I had an uneven waist, with the fact that, you know, I was prone to bruising, in fact, I was prone to, you know, tearing, scarring was like paper, like tissue paper, and all of these things, and scarring for things that shouldn't have been scarred, like cat scratches and stuff that I still have on my hand from when I was like 10.
Wow. Wow. Yeah.
You know, it's things like that. They didn't
Even think twice about
together, which I understand to a degree, because they've got so much to try and remember and collect. But it's when you press them on it that it's like, oh, we can't be wrong. It's you. It's you're over exaggerating. And if you dare try and Google what you're going through, it's like, oh, she's exaggerating. It's like, yes, because nobody else is. It's like, yeah, I'm trying to find out what it is, because it's crap.
Right.
I don't like it. I wouldn't like it to be here anymore, please. Which is why I'm trying to find out what it is. But of course, it is still here, which, you know, I'm okay with that. But at the time, I wasn't. At the time, I was like, let's get this fixed so I can go back to being 13, please, and not have to like argue with doctors about getting access to treatment because I'm a woman and I'm hormonal and I'm exaggerating. Which, no, it's like, oh, you're putting it on. One doctor actually said to my dad, "You sure she's not putting it on for attention for you?" I mean, that in itself, it's like, what generation are you?
Right, exactly. It's so upsetting that this seems to be more of a common thread in talking to people and talking to women, and just not having doctors believe you, but also having doctors not fully understand the things that you're going through. I think through specialists, obviously, they're more in tune with those things, but the initial diagnosis is so tough to get through. Even something so blatant as cancer. I had all of the classic. I had sweat. I was so incredibly itchy. I had sores that wouldn't heal, that were just infected constantly, and I was out of breath. And all of the doctor was like, "Your airways sound fine. You're fine." And I was like, "I'm not fine. Like, I'm not leaving your office until you give me something other than you're fine. Just do something. Run a test." Like, he literally was like, "It sounds fine. You're okay." And I was like, no.
There is always that. I'm sure if you hear like hoofbeats, don't expect it to be a zebra, expect it to be a horse. It's very much the look for the common thing first, which is fine. You can take statistically that makes sense because it affects more people. So you look at the things and then you work your way down. You don't just stop because you don't know what it is.
Right.
You know?
Right.
And then when you have to be an advocate, you use so much of your own energy that you should be using to rest and look after yourself, to fight for the care that you need, because people who are supposed to be doing it for you aren't. And yet we're the issue because we're trying to find out what's wrong. Or we're the issue because we have the nerve to sit here and tell you that you don't know what's going on and to ask for somebody else's opinion.
That's so frustrating. But I'm glad that you were an advocate for yourself and able to come up to them and be like, take another look.
I think it's difficult because I know a lot of people out there, especially with things like EDS, it comes on around puberty. And that means that you start to feel things predominantly, you know, like pain and things like stretch marks and, you know, gastrointestinal stuff that I felt more around the 14, 15 mark than I did when I was a kid. You know, but obviously it was still there. So going through that as a teenager, when you've got so much other stuff going on, it's like I wasn't able to be a child. I wasn't able to be a kid because my health impaired me in such a way from the age of 13, that's still a kid.
Yeah.
You know, like I still should have been going to like the shopping centres with, or like the town with my friends for the first time on the bus independently and doing all that stuff. But instead I was arguing with doctors.
Yeah.
And it's that you do carry that with you. Like you do carry that with you because you're trying to nurture that inner child a lot, because you have to grow up so quick. Mm-hmm. And obviously there's other factors that play into that as well, especially if like with mental health and you know, family dynamic and things like that. But I know it's only recently that it's really dawned on me that my inner child needs me now. Mm-hmm. Because it's been years and years and years of having to grow up so fast. And I always have people say to me, you're so mature, because I'm 20, you're so mature, you know, it's like wise and all this stuff. And it's like, yeah, because I didn't have a choice. Mm-hmm. So yeah. To a degree, it's a silver lining, because it's equipped me with this, but it's still not a positive, because it came from quite a difficult place, which still needs my attention now.
And so what else do you do for like self-love and self-care? Like, what are your go-tos?
I think I talk to myself a lot, which I know people probably like, what? But I have verbal conversations with myself, just talking out loud, so that I can hear myself say the words. So having the mental thought is one thing, hearing myself say it, another thing. It works for me. And to just understand why I'm feeling the way I'm feeling. I think I like to know. And if I don't have an answer, that's okay. I can sit with that. So I juggle between distraction and taking active time to reflect on why I'm feeling how I'm feeling. You know, identifying any potential triggers for situations, how I can work through that to, you know, dispel that trigger in a sense, or accommodate it, depending on what it is, and affirming with myself, you know, that it's okay to feel the way I'm feeling, and it's okay to have setbacks. So really for me, it's a lot of mental reflection when it comes to self-love and stuff, because as important as like the other stuff is, I think for me with my mental health and things like I've had a lot of issues with eating like a few years ago, and body image and stuff like that I think if I address it with myself and I actually think about how I'm feeling, it doesn't seem scary. Or it doesn't seem, you know, so impossible to actually to get through. Mm-hmm. But I also do little things like scrapbooking, and I love the guitar, and you know, my pets, and I do like to video chat with my best friend and my partner, and do stuff like that as well. Nice. That is great. But for me, it's certainly the like positive reinforcement and the affirmations. I know for some people are probably thinking, God, that's boring, but I've learned to love it. I went to therapy for a long time and I learned to love it.
Yeah, there you go. And I'm actually kind of surprised that writing isn't for you, because I love reading your blog. I think that all of your posts are just so in depth. It seems therapeutic, but sometimes that is just an exercise in a different way. Do you find that?
Yeah. It is definitely an exercise of self-love, but I think when it does also take a lot of mental energy, because I've got brain fog. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of, I have to actually be like, I want to write today to do it. But I think an everyday exercise for me is definitely the speak to yourself with kindness side of things. You know, mm-hmm. It's like that type of mental self-care. But writing and reading has always been very therapeutic, but I have to mentally be like ready for it, otherwise I feel like it's disingenuous.
Mm-hmm. It is. I love looking through your posts. I think that they're so great. And I love that
Thank you.
Yeah, I do. I love that you have like educational posts and like talking about how to make Instagram more accessible, but then also have these badass lingerie, like I'm fucking so sick posts. I love that. It's so like empowering in the sense that it's like, this is just like what I want to do.
Thank you. It actually started last year, like at the beginning of last year, January, is when I first started it, and it feels like I've always done it. It's strange. I think I identify so much with how I am now, and I feel like I understand myself so much now because of that journey of like self-expression, self-love. And it was scary. Like doing the shoot was great because I was with a friend of mine, Emily, and like she had come up from Oxford, and like we'd done this shoot like where I am in Newcastle, and it was great. And like we stayed in this sort of like little apartment for a weekend and had a great time. And again, I met her through Instagram. And when it came to posting the pictures, I was so nervous. But the response was great. The response was so lovely and receptive. But we did it because we wanted to. And really, deep down, we did it because we've both struggled with self-confidence. And we're both survivors of sexual abuse. And that is something that is difficult to have that connection with your sexuality following that is rough, and to have that ownership over it. So we both wanted to do that because we understood that that was a part of us that we needed to nurture and we needed to listen to, and we did it, and it was absolutely incredible. It was so bonding. But when it came to posting them, I was really nervous because obviously I was in a bass day and and stockings, and those pictures aren't there anymore because Instagram deleted my first account. But yeah, it was. I've still got them, and I've actually still got a picture. This is from the shoot that I printed out because it's in my wheelchair, and
it's gorgeous.
And
oh, I love it.
It was just great because I was in my wheelchair, which was something that I used to think was so like ugly and just like clumpy and what didn't feel like me. But then I sort of found ways to own it, and then learned to think why I had that sort of deep-seated discontent towards it, I suppose, which of course is because of ableism. But I've now seen my wheelchair and I'm like, oh, it's my body. It's like my legs, you know, like it's fine.
Yeah.
It's great.
And it's helping.
It's just, yeah. I don't see it as something that I feel embarrassed by anymore by any stretch. Sometimes I get a little bit sad that I need it because I want to be able to go on walks in the woods with my mum and the dog. I want to be able to do that because I miss it, and that's okay. It doesn't, make you a bad disabled person for feeling sad about needing mobility aids, but I think it's certainly important to recognize why you feel a certain way about needing them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that shoot was wonderful, and I think my journey with doing like lingerie modeling and stuff like that has been very liberating, and it's certainly something that I feel empowered by, and that was all I wanted it for. It wasn't for anybody else. And I'd just been through a breakup, and I thought, you know what, I feel crap, so I'm gonna do something for me with my badass friend, and we're gonna have a great time. And if we post it, we post it. But we did, and that was that was one of the best choices that I think I've made, because it did allow me to really find myself and that passion and that power that I wanted to unleash. I just didn't know how, and I was scared to.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm really in love with that side of myself now, which is a wonderful thing to say.
No, that's fantastic. I love that. And throughout all your experience with chronic illness and EDS and POTS and all of these things, do you find that you can still be positive?
Yes. I think I used to view positivity as you have to feel positive all the time, which of course we know is impossible. You know, you can't always do that because you're human. So I I certainly do always allow myself to view positivity as saying it's okay to not be okay, or it's okay that I feel sad today doesn't mean that it's permanent. And reminding myself that these sad moments, as valid as they are and as difficult as they are fleeting in the grand scheme of things, but to allow myself to feel sad about it.
Hmm.
Because for a while I used to think, why are you feeling sad about it? You know, it's like, it's not going to achieve anything, is what I thought. And I think that was very much based off of feeling burdensome for expressing the fact I was really sad about my illness and thinking that my illness was burdensome in itself, which I've worked through, and I know it's only burdensome to me because I have to deal with it. But I think I remain positive by just feeling how I want to feel and just allowing those feelings in, because if not, I feel like I'm not being true to myself, and that always finds its way back. So, yeah,
Yeah, and the acceptance that comes with, feeling bad or feeling depressed or feeling sad. It's like accepting that I've found to be really positive. And in the moment, it doesn't feel that way at all. You're just like, I feel like crap, but it's also, I accept this. And like you said, it'll bite you later. If you don't
yeah,
accept that and just embrace that, it does find its way in somehow. So you might as well just accept, like feel this now and move through it as best you
yes,
can.
exactly.
Yeah. And then I do just want to touch on the N.I.W.E. What can you tell me a little bit more about that?
So, yes, that is a northeast based. It's lottery funded, actually. It's national lottery funded, but it's a eating disorder charity in the northeast which gets no government funding at all, and they are a preventative organisation with people who have early signs of eating disorders to get in there quick rather than leaving it to obviously accumulate into a full blown eating disorder. So it helps to save lives, helps, you know, to have that community outreach, but it also, my counselors at college had connections to them. So it does help, you know, reaching out to younger people. But it's an incredibly important charity because we think of eating disorder organizations for people who, you know, you have a picture in your head as to it's incredibly severe because there isn't much intervention at the beginning. So they raise awareness of how eating disorders can present themselves, and they work in particular with women who have been in abusive situations as well. So it's an incredibly powerful organization, which I wish more people knew about. So yeah, thank you very much for allowing me to give them that.
Yeah. And I think that it's great too, because you're right, you don't see a lot of eating disorder organizations preventative before it gets to a point.
Yeah. I know they talk about it as disordered eating behavior and relationships with food in that sense. And they do work with a very wide age range too. It's not specific to a certain group, but it is very small. It's in the northeast of England. So if anyone wants to donate anything, please do, or at least just follow them on social media, you know, boost their posts in some way. But I know my experience there was wonderful, and they were incredible because they allowed me a space even when I was 17, so I couldn't access children and adolescents mental health services in the UK and couldn't access adult mental health services. So there is a gap in age and outreach, and they were there for me then. So if I didn't have them then, I wouldn't have thought of my eating disorder as necessary to bring into the adult mental health space after that. So they helped me get to that point and realize that. So I'm incredibly grateful for them for that.
Wow, that's amazing. Thanks so much for sharing that with me and with everyone else. I really appreciate that. And thank you again for your time.
Thank you, Dayna.
What a freaking sweetheart. I love her. I'm so happy that she wanted to be on the show, and I'm so happy that she shared her experience with us. Thank you, Lori, for your insight into living with EDS and being real about your experience and bringing that awareness to the world. Be sure to donate and share about the N.I.W.E. There will be a link in the show notes. And be sure to follow Lori and dive into her blog and just enjoy. If you liked listening to Still Positive, be sure to subscribe and be notified when a new episode comes out. And as always, thanks again for clicking in, folks. I really appreciate your time, and I just love you guys. So stick around and stay safe.